The wedding reception at the Meadowbrook Country Club sparkled with crystal and candlelight. Emma and David, college sweethearts finally united after 15 years apart, stood beaming before their gathered loved ones. The officiant's words hung in the air. "You may now kiss the bride." As they leaned toward each other, time seemed to slow, Emma's pearl earrings catching the light, David's hands trembling slightly against her waist. Then, like a thunderclap through the champagne-tinged air, a voice shattered the perfect moment. "Stop!" Every head turned toward the stranger at the edge of the dance floor, a man whose expression carried the weight of terrible knowledge. What secret could be powerful enough to halt a wedding at its climactic moment? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. The stranger stood with his arms still extended, chest heaving, as if he'd run miles to reach this moment. He was tall and lean, with graying temples and eyes that burned with purpose. In his left hand, he clutched a worn leather journal, its edges, frayed and binding, cracked with age. "Security!" David's father finally barked, breaking the spell of shocked silence. 2 men in dark suits moved swiftly from the perimeter of the reception hall, but Emma noticed something that stopped her heart. David's face had drained of all color, and his fingers, seconds ago warm against her waist, now dug painfully into her skin. "You know him," she whispered, not a question but a realization. The stranger took a step forward. "My name is Michael Reynolds," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos he'd caused. "And before Emma Thompson, forgive me, Emma Whitmore, now makes the biggest mistake of her life, there are some truths that need to be heard." Rebecca, Emma's maid of honor and best friend since college, moved protectively to her side. "This is outrageous," she hissed. "Someone remove this man." But Emma raised her hand, halting the security guards who had nearly reached Michael. Something in his expression, not malice, but a terrible sincerity, made her hesitate. "Let him speak," she said, her voice surprisingly calm despite the hammering of her heart. David turned to her, his face a mask of disbelief. "Emma, no. This is our wedding day. Whatever grievance this man thinks he has, then it should be easily dismissed," Emma countered, her eyes never leaving Michael's face. "Unless there's something I should know." The gathered guests, 200, of Boston's elite, colleagues, friends and family, murmured and shifted in their seats. Emma's parents exchanged worried glances. David's mother pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Michael Reynolds took another step forward, and now Emma could see the journal more clearly. Newspaper clippings and photographs protruded from its pages, marked with colored tabs and notations. "I knew you both at Westlake University," Michael said, his eyes moving between Emma and David. 15 years ago, recognition dawned slowly across Emma's features. Michael Reynolds, thinner now, more lined, but yes, she remembered him. A quiet, brilliant economics student who had sometimes joined their study group. He'd been more David's, a friend than hers. "Michael," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I remember you." David's grip on her arm tightened. "This isn't the place," he said through clenched teeth. Michael's gaze hardened. "There's never been a place convenient enough for the truth, has there, David? 15 years I've waited." He stepped forward again, ignoring the security guards who flanked him now. He held up the journal. "In here is the documented evidence of who David Whitmore really is, what he's done, who he's hurt." His voice broke slightly. "Including Victoria." At the name, David flinched visibly. Emma felt it like an electric current through his touch. "Victoria?" she repeated. The name meant nothing to her, yet it clearly meant everything to the 2 men, staring each other down across the dance floor. "Emma," David turned to her, his voice low and urgent. "We need to handle this privately. This man is clearly disturbed." "I, David?" Michael challenged. "Then why are you shaking? Why is your right eye twitching, just like it always did when you lied during poker nights?" The reception hall had grown painfully quiet. Even the string quartet had stopped playing, their instruments lowered as they watched the drama unfold. 15 years ago, Michael continued, addressing the entire room now, David Whitmore disappeared from Westlake University under mysterious circumstances. So did $30 million from the university's endowment fund. He paused, letting the words land. That was just the beginning. Emma felt the floor tilt beneath her satin heels. The pearls at her ears suddenly felt heavy. David's wedding. Gift now a weight she couldn't bear. Emma, David whispered, don't listen to him. But she already was. 15 years earlier, autumn leaves blanketed the Westlake University campus in a tapestry of red and gold. Emma Thompson hurried across the quad, her architecture textbooks clutched to her chest, her thoughts focused on the senior design project due next week. At 21, she was brilliant, ambitious and deeply in love with David Morgan. Not Whitmore, not then. She spotted him at their usual bench near the historic bell tower, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he pored over spreadsheets. Even then, his financial acumen had been remarkable. At his side sat Michael Reynolds, younger and more carefree than the man who now stood accusingly in the wedding reception. The numbers don't lie, Michael was saying as Emma approached. The endowment fund's performance is unprecedented. David noticed Emma and quickly folded the papers. We'll discuss this later, he told Michael with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. They were an unlikely trio. Emma with her artistic vision and practical mind, David with his financial brilliance, and Michael with his analytical approach to economics. They had met in philosophy of ethics, ironically enough, and formed a study group that evolved into friendship. What Emma didn't know then was that David had created an investment club with Michael and several other economic students. Using theories that challenged conventional wisdom, they had convinced the university's treasurer to allow them to manage a small portion of the endowment fund as part of an honors project. Their results had been remarkable, or so it seemed. The campus newspaper lay on the bench beside them. Later, Emma would remember the headline on the folded edge, Student Investment Club Yields Record Returns. The article praised the innovative approaches of the students, particularly David Morgan, the group's charismatic leader. It mentioned nothing about the whispers already circulating among the economics faculty about methods too good to be true. That evening, David took Emma to the small Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date. He seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly. Is everything okay? She asked over candlelight. Perfect, he assured her, reaching for her hand. Actually, I've been thinking about our future. After graduation, what if we move to New York? I've been offered an internship at Goldman. Emma blinked in surprise. But I thought we were planning Boston, the architecture firm there. Plans change, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Opportunities arise. We need to be flexible. That night they made love in Emma's small campus apartment with an intensity that in retrospect felt like goodbye. In the morning, David was gone, a hastily scrawled note on her nightstand. Something's come up, we'll call later. He never did. 3 days later, the campus erupted in scandal. The university announced an internal investigation into missing funds. The Student Investment Club was disbanded. Michael Reynolds and other members were questioned extensively. David Morgan had vanished. Emma remembered finding Michael sitting alone in the campus coffee shop, his face hollow with shock. "Did you know?" she had demanded, grief and anger making her voice shake. "No," he'd answered, eyes red-rimmed. We all thought he was brilliant, not a thief." He pushed a document across the table, the official university statement, carefully worded to minimize scandal. The investigation eventually concluded that David had manipulated records and diverted funds. The university, embarrassed by the breach, covered most of it up. No charges were filed publicly. The wealthy alumni who had lost money preferred discretion to justice. Emma graduated with honors, her heart broken, her trust shattered. Michael transferred to another university. Life moved on. For 15 years, Emma believed David Morgan had been a college boyfriend who turned out to be a con man. She never imagined she would meet him again as David Whitmore, never suspected that the man she would fall in love with, for the second time, was the same person who had shattered her world once before. A framed clipping from the university. Newspaper still existed, not in Emma's possession but carefully preserved in Michael's worn leather journal, alongside other evidence of a betrayal much deeper than a young woman's broken heart. In the years that followed the Westlake scandal, Emma Thompson rebuilt herself from the foundation up. She moved to Boston, joined a prestigious architecture firm specializing in historical restoration, and poured her broken heart into her work. The precision required to preserve the past while making it functional for the future became her meditation, her therapy. By 30, she had her name on the Door Thompson Preservation Architecture. By 35, she had won the Crandall Award for her restoration of the Beacon Hill Library, a neo-Gothic masterpiece many had deemed beyond saving. The crystal trophy sat on her office shelf, catching morning light, a testament to her ability to salvage beauty from ruin. "You should date more," Rebecca would tell her during their monthly dinners. Rebecca had been with Emma through everything: the David heartbreak, the scramble for independence, the professional triumphs. "I date," Emma would reply with a dismissive wave. "You have professional encounters that occasionally include dinner," Rebecca corrected. That's not dating. It wasn't that Emma hadn't tried. There had been Robert, the structural engineer with kind eyes and steady hands. James, the history professor who shared her passion for preservation. Even Thomas, the venture capitalist who took her to Paris for their third date. None lasted more than a few months. None of them were David. Meanwhile, David Morgan had ceased to exist the day he left Westlake. Through carefully executed identity theft and the strategic use of the money he emerged in Toronto as David Whitmore, the son of a fictional British expatriate. He spent 3 years there building credentials, then moved to Chicago, where he established a small investment firm. Unlike Emma, David dated strategically, women with connections or wealth that could further his carefully constructed new life. He never stayed with anyone long enough for them to glimpse behind his polished facade. If sometimes in the dark he thought of Emma, her laugh, her brilliance, her unwavering ethical compass, he pushed those thoughts away by morning. With each successful year, his operation grew more legitimate. He developed genuine financial expertise to complement his natural talent for persuasion. By his mid-30s, Whitmore Capital Partners managed over $200 million in assets. Most of it was legitimate, a perfect cover for the portions that weren't. What David didn't know was that Michael Reynolds had never stopped looking for him. After transferring to MIT to complete his economics degree, Michael had joined the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, driven by a personal vendetta he disguised as professional ambition. For years, he gathered evidence following money trails that had gone cold, reconstructing the elaborate shell game that had allowed David Morgan to disappear. Then came the charity gala in Chicago, 2 years before the wedding. Emma, there to receive an award for her work restoring a historic theater, looked up during the applause to see a face she'd never forgotten. Older, more refined, but unmistakable. "David," she had whispered, the champagne flute nearly slipping from her fingers. He had turned, startled, then composed his features into polite confusion. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" "It's Emma Thompson, from Westlake." For a moment, panic flashed in his eyes, quickly replaced by what appeared to be dawning recognition. "Emma, my God, it's been 15 years, she supplied. "You look incredible." His gaze moved over her with genuine appreciation. "I never thought I'd see you again." Later, he would explain that he had left Westlake suddenly because his father had died, requiring his immediate return to England. Family complications had kept him there, he claimed, until he built his new life in America. The name change had been his mother's idea, to honor his maternal grandfather's legacy. Emma, successful but lonely, wanted to believe him. The chemistry between them remained undeniable. When he asked for her number, she gave it. When he called the next day, she answered. 2 years later, they stood at the altar, the past seemingly buried, until Michael Reynolds appeared with his worn leather journal and the truth it contained. Back at the wedding reception, the room remained frozen in a tableau of suspended celebration. Champagne bubbled undrunk in crystal flutes. The 5-tier cake stood uncut. Emma's father had moved to her side, while David's mother gripped the edge of the head table, her knuckles white against the ivory linen. "May I approach?" Michael asked, his voice steady, despite the security guards flanking him. Emma nodded, her architect's mind already reassembling the man she thought she knew, examining him for structural flaws she had missed. "Emma!" David whispered urgently. "Don't do this! Not here!" She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "If there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to fear." Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it up, like evidence in a courtroom. On this drive are financial records documenting a 15-year history of fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement, beginning at Westlake University and continuing to the present day. He looked directly at David. "Your husband isn't David Whitmore. There is no David Whitmore. The man you married is David Morgan, and he's been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme that has defrauded investors of more than $40 million. A collective gasp rippled through the reception hall. Emma's mother pressed her hand to her mouth. Rebecca moved closer to Emma, as if to physically shield her from the words. "That's absurd," David said, his voice carrying across the room. "This man clearly has mental health issues. I've never seen that USB drive before in my life." "Really?" Michael countered, "because your fingerprints are on it, along with Victoria's." At the second mention of this name, David's composure slipped further. Emma noticed a tremor in his left hand, which he quickly concealed by adjusting his cufflink. "Who is Victoria?" Emma asked, her voice cutting through the tension. Michael's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "Victoria Chen was our partner at Westlake. She was brilliant, a mathematical prodigy. She helped David design the algorithm that made the initial fraud possible." He paused. "She was also David's girlfriend, while he was dating you." Emma felt as if she'd been struck. "That's not possible. We were together constantly." "Not during his frequent study sessions with the investment club," Michael said gently. "Victoria believed they were building something revolutionary. By the time she realized what David was really doing, it was too late. When David disappeared from Westlake, so did Victoria." David laughed, though the sound held no humor. "This is preposterous. Emma, you can't possibly believe." 3 years ago," Michael continued, speaking directly to Emma, "Victoria contacted me. She had evidence, everything on this drive. We were going to take it to the authorities together." His voice caught. "The day before our meeting, she was found dead in her apartment. Apparent suicide." The word hung in the air like a thundercloud. Emma stared at the USB drive, its metallic surface catching the light from the crystal chandeliers above. "Give me that." David suddenly lunged forward, reaching for the drive. Michael stepped back quickly. "Your new wife deserves to know who she married. Your investors, many of whom are in this room, deserve to know what you've done with their money." Emma looked around the reception hall, seeing familiar faces differently now. Her parents, David's, colleagues, friends who had invested in Whitmore Capital Partners on their recommendation. Had they all been victims? "David," she said quietly, turning to the man she had just vowed to spend her life with. "Tell me this isn't true." For a moment, something like genuine anguish crossed his features. Then his expression hardened. "Don't. Let him destroy what we have, what we've built." "What you've built," Michael corrected, "on lies and stolen money." He held the USB drive out to Emma. Everything you need to know is here. Bank records, transfers, identity documentation, Victoria's notes, the complete picture of who you really married today. Emma stared at the small device. Such a tiny thing to contain the destruction of her world. With shaking fingers, she reached. Umvorit. The crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across faces, now twisted with confusion and alarm. As Emma's fingers closed around the USB drive, the spell of shocked silence finally broke. The reception hall erupted into a cacophony of voices, questions, denials, exclamations of disbelief. "I've known David for 8 years," protested Gerald Harrington, a silver-haired investment banker who had given the first toast. "This is outrageous." "Someone call the police," demanded David's mother, her carefully coiffed hair coming loose. As she gestured wildly, Emma's father stepped between his daughter and the two men. "That's enough. This is a private family matter that we'll handle appropriately, not as some public spectacle." But it was already too late for privacy. Phones had emerged from pockets and purses. The modern instinct to document drama had overtaken several guests' sense of propriety. Rebecca moved swiftly, her bridesmaid's dress swishing as she addressed the crowd. "Everyone, please, the reception is obviously postponed. We ask for your understanding and discretion as the family addresses these concerns." Emma barely heard any of it. She stood motionless, the USB drive cold against her palm, her eyes fixed on the platinum band, encircling her fourth finger. An hour ago, placing that ring on her finger had felt like the culmination of a perfect love story. Now it felt like a shackle, binding her to a man she might never have known at all. "Emma." David's voice cut through her thoughts. He had moved closer, speaking low enough that only she could hear. "Give me 5 minutes, alone. There's an explanation for all of this." She looked up at him, this man she had loved twice in one lifetime, and searched for the truth in his eyes. "Is your name even David?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Yes." "That much is true. And the rest?" He glanced at the USB drive in her hand. "Partial truths twisted into lies. Michael has been obsessed with destroying me for years. And Rebecca," he glanced at her, "clearly had deeper feelings for Victoria than she's acknowledged. Neither is objective." "And you are?" Emma challenged. "I'm trying to protect what we've built," David insisted. "All of us, our investors, our company, our future." The word "our" hung in the air between them. Yesterday, Emma had believed in that shared future. Now, she wasn't sure she knew the man. "Claiming to protect it. If Victoria is alive," she said finally, "we need to find her. She's the only one who knows the complete truth." The gathering in Emma's apartment was interrupted by the chime of her doorbell. Rebecca answered, returning with Emma's parents. Robert Thompson's face was ashen, her mother's eyes red-rimmed from crying. "We've been calling the foundation board members," Robert said without preamble. "The situation is worse than we thought." "David." You rose immediately. "Robert, Elizabeth, whatever Michael has told you, this isn't about Michael." Emma's father cut him off. "We've been checking accounts, making calls. The Thompson Foundation isn't the only one with significant investments in Whitmore Capital. Half our friends, our charitable partners, they're all exposed." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "How many people?" Her father placed a folder on the coffee table, a client list, meticulously annotated with investment amounts. 137 individual investors, 28 charitable foundations, collectively over $200 million. The room fell silent as the magnitude sank in. Emma scanned the list, recognizing name after name. Wedding guests, family, friends, mentors, people who had trusted. David because they trusted her family. "This isn't just about money," her mother said, voice breaking. "The Reynolds Cancer Center. They have 12 million with Whitmore. That's patient care, research grants." David stepped forward, his demeanor shifting to the confident financial advisor Emma had watched charm countless potential clients. "The funds are secure. Yes, there were irregularities in the past, but current investments are legitimate. If everyone panics and withdraws simultaneously, that creates a crisis where none exists. Where are the audited financials? Robert demanded. The third-party verifications. We've had clean audits for 5 consecutive years, James interjected. From Patterson and Wise, Michael countered. A 2-partner firm where one partner is David's former college roommate. Hardly independent. David's attorney touched his client's arm in warning, but David shook him off. You're making wild accusations based on circumstantial evidence and personal vendetta. Am I? Michael pulled out another document from his seemingly endless supply. This is a withdrawal request submitted yesterday before the wedding for $50 million from the operational accounts of Whitmore Capital. Signed by you, David. Emma stared at her husband. You were planning to empty the accounts today? It's a scheduled reallocation, David insisted. For a new investment vehicle we're launching next quarter. To a bank in the Cayman Islands? Michael pressed. James stepped between them. That's a legitimate correspondent bank for international investments. It's also non-extraditable, Michael pointed out. Emma's mother sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. The Foundation's annual grant cycle begins next month. Dozens of organizations are counting on those funds. The weight of responsibility crashed down on Emma. These weren't just numbers on a page. They were cancer treatments, scholarships, community programs, real people who would suffer real consequences. I need to see all of it, she said quietly. Every account, every transaction. David's expression hardened. Those are confidential client records. Not from me, Emma's father countered. Not when the Thompson Foundation is your largest investor. And not from your wife, Emma added, meeting David's gaze unflinchingly. Unless there's something you're particularly eager to hide. The room crackled with tension. Finally, David nodded to James. Show them the portal access, but this stays in this room. A public panic would be catastrophic for everyone. James reluctantly opened his laptop, logging into a secure system. As the account dashboard appeared, Emma leaned forward, her architectural mind mapping the structure of the financial edifice David had built. At first glance, everything appeared orderly, accounts properly segregated, returns consistent but not implausibly high. But as James navigated deeper, Emma noticed patterns. Circular transactions, timestamps that didn't align, repetitive transfers between related entities. Wait, she said suddenly. Go back to the Thompson Foundation account. James hesitated, glancing at David before reluctantly returning to the previous screen. Emma pointed to a transaction dated 6 weeks earlier, a sizable outflow. That's my signature authorizing this transfer, but I never signed this. David shifted uncomfortably. Your father approved it. Robert Thompson stood abruptly. I most certainly did not. Emma stared at the digital signature, then at David. The man she had married hours ago was rapidly becoming a stranger before her eyes. How many other forged authorizations are in this system? Before David could answer, Emma's phone chimed with an incoming text. She glanced down, then froze. It was from an unknown number. I have the dragon. Meet me. Alone. Emma stared at her phone, heart racing. She slipped it into her pocket before anyone could see the message, but Rebecca caught the movement, eyes narrowing with suspicion. We need a moment, Rebecca announced suddenly, taking Emma's arm. Bridal emergency. She steered Emma toward the bedroom before anyone could object. The moment the door closed behind them, Rebecca turned to her friend. What just happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Emma hesitated, then showed her the text. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. It's her. It has to be. How can we be sure? Emma whispered. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Because only Victoria would know about the dragon. She sat heavily on the edge of Emma's bed. There's something I haven't told you, something I should have shared months ago. Emma sat beside her oldest friend, the woman who had stood beside her at the altar just hours earlier. Tell me now, Rebecca pulled out her phone, navigating to a password-protected folder. Last September, Victoria came to me terrified. She said she'd discovered something in David's private files, evidence of money laundering for some very dangerous clients. She pressed play on an audio file. A woman's voice, soft but urgent, filled the room. "He'll kill me if he knows I copied these files. The offshore accounts, the shell companies. It's not just fraud, Beck, it's worse. Some of this money comes from people who don't leave witnesses." David's voice responded, clear and unmistakable. "You're being dramatic, Vic. This is business. Complicated, yes, but profitable for everyone involved. I saw the meeting you had with those men from Bogota. That wasn't business, that's enough!" David's voice turned harsh. "You signed the same documents I did. You're just as implicated. Remember that before you do something stupid." The recording ended. Emma stared at Rebecca in horror. "You recorded them?" "Victoria did," Rebecca explained. "She'd been suspicious for months. That night she came to me with the recording and a flash drive of documents." She paused, eyes downcast. "We were more than friends by then. Had been for almost a year." "A year?" Emma's voice rose in disbelief. "You were in a relationship with her while I was engaged to David, and you never thought to mention it?" Victoria insisted on secrecy. She said David was possessive, controlling, that he still considered her his in some way, even years after their relationship ended. Rebecca wiped away a tear. "I wanted to tell you, but Victoria was convinced it would put us both in danger." "So what happened to the flash drive?" "Victoria kept it, said she had a secure hiding place." Rebecca looked up. "I think it's in the Jade Dragon. It's hollow. She used to hide small items in it." Emma paced the bedroom, mind racing. "And now she wants to meet me. Why not you?" "Because she doesn't know who to trust anymore," Rebecca said softly. "The night she disappeared, we had a fight. She wanted to go to the authorities immediately. I thought we needed more evidence, a stronger case. Why would she trust me, a complete stranger?" "You're not a stranger to her," Rebecca admitted. "She's been watching you, researching you since you and David got engaged. She needed to know if you were involved in his schemes." Emma felt a chill. "And what did she conclude?" "That you were another victim, like me." Rebecca stood, gripping Emma's shoulders. "You can't meet her alone. It's too dangerous. If David suspects—" "He won't," Emma assured her. "Everyone in that room is too focused on the financial evidence." She checked the time. The text didn't specify when or where to meet. As if on cue, her phone chimed again. Midnight. The bell. "Tower at Westlake. Come alone, or I disappear for good." Rebecca read the message over Emma's shoulder. "The bell tower. Where it all began. I need to go," Emma said decisively. "Not without backup," Rebecca countered. She pulled a small device. From her purse, a voice recorder, sleek and modern. "If Victoria has evidence that could bring down David and protect all those investors, we need to capture it properly." Emma took the recorder, studying it. "You came prepared." Rebecca's expression hardened. "I've been preparing for this day for 6 months, Em. Since Victoria vanished, I've been gathering every scrap of evidence I could find." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. About your father." Emma stiffened. "What about him?" Victoria mentioned him in her notes. She thought he might have unknowingly helped launder money through the Thompson Foundation. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Emma's feet. "That's impossible. My father would never—" "Not knowingly," Rebecca clarified, "but Victoria thought David was using your father's reputation, his connections. She was still investigating when she disappeared." Emma clutched the voice recorder, her world continuing to unravel thread by thread. "We need to get back out there before they get suspicious. Act normal." Rebecca nodded, then pulled Emma into a tight hug. "Whatever happens tonight, remember, Victoria risked everything to expose the truth. She's not the villain in this story." "At this point," Emma said grimly, "I'm not sure who is." When Emma and Rebecca returned to the living room, the atmosphere had grown even more tense. Michael stood at James's shoulder, pointing at something on the laptop screen, while David's attorney frantically made notes. Emma's parents huddled together on the sofa, their expressions grim. "What now?" Emma asked, striving for normalcy despite the midnight rendezvous now looming in her mind. Michael looked up. "We've identified a pattern of transfers. Approximately $40 million has been systematically moved offshore over the past 18 months. To where?" Emma moved closer to see the screen. "A labyrinth," Michael said grimly. "Cayman Islands to Singapore to Liechtenstein to Cyprus. The money keeps moving, staying just ahead of regulatory tracking." James shifted uncomfortably. "These are legitimate investment vehicles for high-net-worth clients seeking privacy and tax efficiency. They're hiding places," Robert Thompson countered. "And none of this was disclosed in our investment agreements." David maintained his composure, though Emma noticed a slight tremor in his left hand. "International diversification is standard practice for a portfolio of this size." "Not without disclosure it isn't," Michael shot back. He pulled up another document, pages of banking codes and transaction records. "What's most interesting is that someone is still accessing these accounts regularly." All eyes turned to David, who merely shrugged. "Of course, we actively manage all our investments, including this one." Michael highlighted a specific transfer, $5 million moved just 3 days earlier. "This particular account requires in-person authentication at the bank in Geneva, with fingerprint verification." David's confident facade cracked slightly. "James handles our European transactions." James stiffened. "I haven't been to Geneva in months." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Emma studied the two men, noting the growing distance between them, partners suddenly becoming adversaries. "If neither of you authorized this transfer," Emma said slowly, "then who did?" "Victoria," David and Michael said simultaneously. Then glared at each other. Emma's mother spoke up, her voice surprisingly steady. "If this woman is still alive and accessing these accounts, why haven't you gone to the authorities?" David exchanged glances with his attorney. "The situation is complicated because he's implicated," Michael explained. "If Victoria goes down, so does David. They built this scheme together." "That's speculation," Warren Hargreaves interjected. "Is it?" Emma's father stood, his patience visibly exhausted. "Let me be very clear. If the Thompson Foundation loses its endowment because of your complicated situation, we will press charges. Fraud, forgery, breach of fiduciary duty. Everything we can throw at you." David's composure finally slipped. "Robert, be reasonable. A public scandal benefits no one. Let me resolve this privately, recover the missing funds, stabilize the accounts. No one needs to lose anything. Except your freedom," Michael muttered. Emma moved to her father's side. "Dad, what if the money's already gone? What happens to the Foundation's commitments?" Robert's face fell. "We'd be ruined, not just financially, but our reputation, our ability to do good work." Emma felt sick. Her parents had built their foundation over decades, channeling the family's construction business profits into education and healthcare initiatives. The thought of that legacy being destroyed because of her husband's deception was unbearable. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a reminder that in just a few hours she'd be meeting the one person who might have answers. "There's something else," James said suddenly, his voice low. "Something Victoria and I discovered before she disappeared." He glanced nervously at David. "We found unusual payment patterns to accounts in Colombia and Russia, large sums moving through our client accounts, then disappearing into numbered accounts." David surged to his feet. "James, stop now!" But James continued, the words tumbling out as if he'd held them back too long. "I thought it was just tax evasion for wealthy clients, but then Victoria found connections to known criminal organizations. She said David was knowingly laundering money for drug cartels and oligarchs." The room fell silent. David's attorney placed a restraining hand on his client's arm, as David seemed ready to lunge at James. "That's why she ran," James finished. Not because she stole money, but because she knew too much. Emma stared at the documents on the screen, the offshore account statements with their strings of numbers and codes. Each entry represented money moving silently across borders, hiding its origins, obscuring its purpose. Money that included her parents' life's work, her friends' investments, funds meant for cancer research and educational scholarships. She checked her watch. 6 hours until midnight. The accusations hung in the air like toxic smoke. Money laundering, drug cartels, Russian oligarchs. The words seemed incongruous in Emma's tastefully decorated apartment, against the backdrop of wedding gifts still waiting to be opened. David's attorney whispered urgently in his client's ear. David nodded, then addressed the room. These allegations are both defamatory and dangerous. I suggest we adjourn until cooler heads prevail. Running again, Michael taunted. Exercising prudence, David countered. James, we'll discuss your outburst privately. James paled but held his ground. No more private discussions, David. I'm done covering for you. Covering what exactly? Emma demanded. James hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document. The original partnership agreement for Whitmore Capital. The real one, not the version filed with regulators. Emma took the document, unfolding it carefully. The paper was high quality, legal-sized, with formal language outlining the formation of the company. 3 signature lines appeared at the bottom: David Morgan, not Whitmore, Victoria Chen, and a third name that had been heavily redacted. Who is the third partner? Emma asked, studying the blacked-out signature. James swallowed hard. That's what Victoria discovered 3 years ago. The silent partner who provided the initial capital after Westlake, money to create new identities, establish the firm, gain credibility. All eyes turned to James, but he shook his head. I was brought in later after the foundation was established. I never knew who the original investor was. Victoria figured it out, Michael said, leaning forward. That's why she created the backdoor access to the servers. She was looking for the money trail leading to the silent partner. David stood abruptly. This is pointless speculation. That agreement is nearly 15 years old. The company's structure has changed completely since then. Has it? Michael challenged. Or is the same silent partner still pulling strings, still collecting their share of both legitimate profits and laundered funds? Emma studied the document more closely, noting the date, just 3 months after David had disappeared from Westlake. Her mind raced. Who would have had both the capital and the motivation to help David establish a new identity and business? A cold realization washed over her. She turned slowly to her father. Dad, when did you first invest in Whitmore Capital? Robert Thompson shifted uncomfortably. About 7 years ago, when David approached us with an opportunity. Are you sure? It wasn't earlier? Emma pressed. Much earlier. The color drained from her father's face. What exactly are you suggesting? Emma held up the partnership agreement. Someone helped David disappear after Westlake. Someone with money, connections, and a reason to keep him out of prison. Her voice caught. Someone who might have wanted to protect his daughter from scandal. The room fell silent. Her mother gasped softly, one hand flying to her mouth. Robert, she whispered. Tell me you didn't. Emma's father stood, his authoritative presence suddenly diminished. It wasn't like that, not at first. Dad? Emma could barely form the word. Robert Thompson, respected businessman, philanthropist, civic leader, seemed to age a decade before their eyes. David came to me after the Westlake incident, said he'd made terrible mistakes, but wanted to make things right. He paused. He told me how much he loved you, Emma. That everything had spiraled out of control. So you funded his escape? His new identity? Michael asked incredulously. I funded a fresh start, Robert corrected, a legitimate business that would eventually repay what was taken from Westlake. And it did. Anonymous donations, rebuilding the endowment, while building a money laundering operation, Michael added bitterly. I knew nothing about that, Robert insisted. My involvement was strictly in the legitimate side of the business. David assured me he lied, Emma interrupted, her voice hollow. Just like he lied to me, to everyone. Her father reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The foundation investments? Was that your idea or his? He approached us, her mother said softly, said it would be appropriate, given Robert's early support, to bring our foundation in as a major client. Perfect cover, Michael muttered. Who would question the Thompson Foundation's investment choices? Their impeccable reputation provided the ultimate legitimacy. Emma stared at her father, the man who had walked her down the aisle hours earlier, who had built a philanthropic legacy, who'd apparently helped create the elaborate fraud, now threatening to destroy them all. Does Victoria know you're the third partner? She asked quietly. Robert nodded slowly. She figured it out 3 years ago. Came to me privately before approaching David. His voice broke. I never thought he would, that she would end up dead? Michael. Finished for him. Emma checked her watch again. 5 hours until midnight. 5 hours until she would face Victoria herself, the woman who knew all their secrets. The confrontation in Emma's apartment continued late into the evening. David had retreated into tense silence, conferring occasionally with his attorney in hushed tones. James sat apart, looking shell-shocked by his own revelations. Michael methodically documented everything, building his case. Emma's parents huddled together on the sofa, their world unraveling alongside their daughters. At 11, Emma made her move. I need some air, she announced, rising from her seat. And frankly, some space from all of you. David looked up sharply. It's not safe for you to leave. Safe from whom? Emma challenged. The criminals you've been laundering money for, or from you? His face hardened. This situation is volatile. We need to present a united front while we resolve it. There is. No we anymore, David, Emma replied coldly. Not after today. Rebecca stood. I'll go with her. No, Emma said firmly. I need to be alone, to think. Michael approached her, speaking low enough that only she could hear. Be careful. Victoria was terrified for a reason. Emma nodded slightly, then addressed the room. I'll be back in a couple of hours. Until then, nobody leaves. My parents deserve complete answers from all of you. She grabbed her keys and a light jacket, trying to appear casual despite her pounding heart. David moved to intercept her at the door. Emma, he said, his voice softening to the intimate tone that had once made her feel like the only person in his world. We can fix this. Together. Everything I've done, the good and the bad, has been to build something worthy of you. For a moment, Emma saw the man she had fallen in love with twice, the charming, brilliant man with vision and ambition. Then she remembered the forged signatures, the offshore accounts, Victoria's fear. The man before her was a masterful performance, not a person. Goodbye, David, she said simply and walked out. Once in her car, Emma texted Rebecca, on my way. Cover for me if needed. The drive to Westlake University took 40 minutes, the campus eerily quiet during summer break. The historic bell tower stood sentinel over the deserted quad, illuminated by soft ground lighting. Emma parked nearby, checking. The time, 11:48 p.m. Her phone buzzed with messages from David, her parents, even Michael, but she ignored them all. Tonight was about Victoria, the woman whose life had been destroyed alongside Emma's, though in very different ways. As midnight approached, Emma climbed the stone steps to the bell tower's observation deck. The door was unlocked, swinging open. At her touch, inside, moonlight streamed through arched windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. "Hello?" she called softly. Movement from the darkest corner. A figure emerged, slender, graceful, with short, dark hair that hadn't been in the photographs. The woman looked younger than Emma had expected, but there was a hardness to her eyes that spoke of years lived in fear. "Emma Thompson," Victoria Chen said, her voice accented slightly. "We finally meet." "You're really alive," Emma breathed. Victoria's mouth curved in a humorless smile, disappointingly for some. She stepped closer into a shaft of moonlight. Emma could see now the careful cosmetic alterations, subtle changes to her nose, a jawline, enough to pass casual scrutiny, to become someone new. You changed your appearance, Emma observed. Necessary when you're dead, Victoria replied. But not as drastically as your husband changed his. Victoria reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew a small object, a jade dragon figurine, intricately carved, fitting in the palm of her hand. I believe you've been looking for this. Emma stared at the dragon, the artifact that supposedly contained the final evidence against David. Why reach out to me? Why now? Because the $50 million transfer was approved yesterday, Victoria said grimly. The money moves tomorrow at noon. Once it's gone forever, along with your parents' foundation and everyone else's investments. But you've been accessing the accounts, Emma said, remembering the Geneva transaction. Victoria shook her head. Not me. I've been monitoring the accounts, tracking the movements. But I haven't withdrawn a cent. Then who? Your husband and his real partner, Victoria interrupted. The one who makes David look like an amateur. Emma's blood ran cold. My father? Victoria's laugh held no humor. Robert Thompson was just another useful idiot. I'm talking about the person who taught David everything he knows about reinventing himself. She held out the jade dragon. The evidence is all here, including a recent passport photo of the real mastermind. Emma took the dragon with trembling hands. Who? Victoria's eyes darkened. James Wilson, David's supposed best man, the man who's been playing everyone from the beginning. Dawn broke over Boston as Emma's plan came together. After her midnight revelation from Victoria, she had made a flurry of calls. To Michael, to Rebecca, even to her shell-shocked parents. By 8 a.m., the stage was set at her apartment. David arrived first, looking haggard but still projecting confidence. Emma thanked God. Where have you been? I've been worried sick. She met his concern with cool detachment, seeking answers, which I found. James Wilson arrived minutes later, his corporate mask firmly in place. David filled me in. You disappeared. For hours? Highly irresponsible given the situation. Emma studied James with new awareness. The unassuming CFO, always in David's shadow, always carefully documenting everything while staying just out of the spotlight. Rebecca and Michael arrived, together, followed by Emma's parents. Last came Victoria, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses despite the early hour. David's face drained of color at the sight of her. Surprise, Victoria said flatly. Not quite as dead as advertised. Warren Hargreaves, David's attorney, immediately stood. This meeting is inappropriate. Your client is the least of our concerns, Emma interrupted. She nodded to Michael, who connected his laptop to her television. We're here to discuss James Wilson and his 18-year history of financial fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. James laughed nervously. What are you talking about? I'm just the CFO. Victoria removed a small camera from her purse, setting it on the coffee table. I'm recording this for my protection, she announced, then turned to face James. Or should I call you Jonathan Wells, or perhaps Martin Crane? You've had so many names. The blood drained from James's face. Victoria, you're clearly unwell. The jade dragon contained a flash drive, Emma explained to the room, with passport photos, banking records, and a very interesting video confession from a man named Peter Simmons, who apparently helped create new identities for both David and James after Westlake. Michael advanced to the first slide, a college photograph showing 3 young men, David, James, and a third student. This is from Westlake's yearbook. James Wilson was David's roommate freshman year before transferring to Princeton. 3 years later, he mysteriously reappears in David's life with a new backstory and finance credentials. This is absurd, James protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Victoria stepped forward. I discovered the connection 3 years ago. James wasn't just helping David, he created David Whitmore. The real James Wilson died in a boating accident in 2007. His identity was repurposed. David stared at his CFO, confusion evident. What is she talking about? She's delusional, James insisted, edging toward the door. The fingerprints on the Geneva account, Michael continued, advancing to another slide showing banking records. They match neither David nor Victoria, but they do match prison records for a Jonathan Wells, convicted of wire fraud in 2003, who disappeared during a prison transfer in 2005. Emma's father leaned forward, his expression darkening. Are you saying I've been financing a convicted felon? You've been financing several, Victoria corrected. But James was the architect. David was just the charming front man, the distraction while James built the real operation. David surged to his feet. That's a lie. This was my company, my vision. James's demeanor suddenly changed, his perpetual nervousness replaced by cold calculation. Your vision? You couldn't strategize your way out of a paper bag, David. You were always the face, handsome, persuasive, with that sad story about your dead father. The perfect salesman. The room fell silent as years of deception cracked open. Tomorrow's $50 million transfer, Emma said quietly. Where was it really going? James smiled thinly. Wouldn't you like to know? Victoria pressed a button on her phone to an account in Singapore, which would then split into 17 smaller transfers. James has been siphoning funds for years, building his exit strategy. You ungrateful bitch, James snarled, his refined facade completely gone. I made you rich, I taught you everything. You used me, Victoria countered. Just like you used David, and Emma, and everyone else. David looked stricken, the full extent of his own manipulation dawning on him. All this time, Emma nodded to Michael, who pressed a button on his laptop. The television screen showed a video of Victoria, the real confession she had recorded before disappearing 3 years ago, detailing everything she had discovered about James's operation. As the video played, James made a sudden move toward the door, but found Michael blocking his path. James Wilson, you're under arrest, came a new voice from the hallway. 2 FBI agents entered, badges displayed. We have some questions about those accounts in Geneva. The Jade Dragon had yielded its final secret, and with it, the truth that would change all their lives forever. 1 year later, the September sun bathed the construction site in golden light as Emma Thompson surveyed the progress. The Reynolds Community Center was taking shape, its innovative design incorporating sustainable materials and elements from the historic neighborhood it would serve. Where once had stood abandoned warehouses, now rose a promise of renewal. The East Wing framing is complete, she told the site manager. We should be able to start on the solar installation next week. As the manager moved away, Emma unrolled the architectural plans, her design, her vision, her redemption project. The center would house healthcare services, educational programs, and community resources, funded largely by recovered assets from the Whitmore capital scandal. It's looking good, said a familiar voice behind her. Emma turned to find Michael Reynolds approaching, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. The obsessive intensity that had driven him for 15 years had softened since James Wilson's conviction 6 months ago. The foundation board approved the expanded children's wing, Emma told him, pointing to the plans. Your sister would be proud to have her name on this. Michael nodded, emotion briefly crossing his features. Victoria's testimony was the key. Without her documentation, half these funds would still be hidden offshore. Victoria Chen had emerged from hiding to become the star witness in the federal case against James Wilson. Her meticulous records, combined with the evidence in the Jade Dragon, had led to the recovery of nearly 90% of the misappropriated funds. In exchange, For her cooperation, she'd received immunity and a fresh start, this time with proper documentation and protection. "Have you heard from her?" Emma asked. "She's teaching mathematics in Toronto," Michael replied, under her real name again, "and Rebecca visits most weekends." Emma smiled. Some relationships had survived the wreckage of that wedding day, finding stronger footing in truth than they'd ever had in deception. "And David?" Michael asked cautiously. Emma gazed across the construction site. 3 years at Danbury minimum security. His cooperation reduced the sentence. She paused. "He writes sometimes. Still trying to explain, I think. Still believing he can charm his way back. And your father?" This was harder. "Community service. 500 hours, most of which he's doing here." She gestured to the site. "He's been humbled. The foundation is under independent management now, but he's trying to rebuild what he almost destroyed." They walked together toward Emma's car, past the large sign announcing the project, the Reynolds Community Center, building a future of transparency and service. "Did you ever imagine that day at the wedding that it would end like this?" Michael asked. Emma thought back to the moment when a stranger's voice had shattered her perfect day. "I never imagined any of it. Not David's deception, not James's. Manipulation, not my father's compromise." She shook her head. "Certainly not that I'd end up divorcing a man I'd been married to for less than 8 hours. Shortest marriage in Massachusetts history," Michael attempted to joke. "Not even close, apparently." Emma smiled, despite herself, though probably the most expensive per hour. At her car, Emma retrieved a small package from the passenger seat. "I have something for you." She handed it to Michael. "It seemed right that you should have it." He unwrapped the package to find the jade dragon, now empty of its secrets, but still beautiful in its craftsmanship. "Victoria sent it to me before she relocated," Emma explained. "Said it had served its purpose." Michael turned the figurine in his hands. "Some things look decorative, but hold tremendous power." "Like evidence," Emma agreed. "Or truth." They stood, in comfortable silence, two people who had been strangers a year ago, now connected by the extraordinary unraveling of a shared deception. "The irony," Emma said finally, "is that I'm actually grateful to him." "To James?" Michael asked, surprised. "To the man who stopped my wedding. If you hadn't spoken up that day—" She gestured to the community center rising behind them. "None of this would exist. The money would be gone, the truth still buried." Michael smiled. "Maybe that's the real lesson. Sometimes the most painful interruptions are actually the universe course-correcting." Emma glanced at her watch. "I should go." Meeting with the foundation board about Phase 2 funding. As she drove away, Emma caught sight of the community center in her rearview mirror, the physical manifestation of her new beginning. From the ashes of deception had risen something authentic, something true. The interrupted kiss had led to an unexpected path, one where she had found her own voice rather than echoing someone else's story.